It's 2012 to 2013. Mustaches are everywhere. Everyone is doing the Harlem Shake. Vine is still alive. I religiously wore jeggings, a mix of skinny jeans and leggings. Keep Calm and Carry On ruled our lives, and I was 9 years old. And in 3rd grade. And I got diagnosed with ADHD. Of course, this diagnosis became a major part of my life and my identity. And when I did finally receive this diagnosis, it felt like an awakening of sorts. It felt like I was finally able to understand this part of myself that I hadn't been able to prior. But this video essay isn't about my ADHD diagnosis. It's about Percy Jackson, and more specifically, the Riordanverse. Shortly after receiving my ADHD diagnosis, my mother searched for any media that had representations of children with ADHD in it for me to consume. I've always been a huge bookworm, hence why I'm an English major. So my mom's looked for a book series that could help me understand my new diagnosis. That's when they found the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series by Rick Riordan. And my mother's instantly knew I had to read the series, because not only did the series feature kids with ADHD as the main characters, but it also featured Greek mythology, which was, and still is, one of my biggest hyperfixations. My mother's recommended the first book in the series to me, Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, which came out in 2005. I remember I had it downloaded on my Kindle Fire. Yes, I did actually read on my Kindle Fire, and I devoured the book in probably 2 days. I was obsessed, and I felt so seen by the characters in the text. The main character and the title character of the series is Percy Jackson, and he has both ADHD and dyslexia. Something that for the time the book was released, 2005, was not common for YA literature. For me, I felt so empowered, reading about a character who shared the same diagnosis as me, who is the hero of the story. Not only does Percy have ADHD and dyslexia in the series, but a lot of the other characters in the series also have ADHD and dyslexia. But again, this video essay isn't about ADHD and how impactful the Percy Jackson series has been for me in terms of highlighting neurodivergent kids. The Percy Jackson series, or as fans have begun to call it, the Riordanverse, has meant a lot to me throughout my life. I've been obsessed with the series and the characters since I was 9 years old, and I have been able to find a lot of myself in the characters from the series. In middle school, when I began reading the Heroes of Olympus series, I started to realize that my strong feelings about the relationship between the characters of Piper McLean and Annabeth Chase weren't typical. I shipped these two characters so hard, and I projected a lot of myself onto the character of Annabeth Chase, and I still do, in case you couldn't tell from my outfit. And slowly I started to realize through these characters that I may be bisexual. I know that may seem silly, but it's true. The Percy Jackson series truly helped me to realize that I am queer. That wasn't a unique Ella-only experience. A lot of queer kids were able to find themselves within the series and the characters in the series. The Percy Jackson series and the Riordanverse made a lot of kids queer. Obviously, this is just an exaggeration, but truthfully, this series had a positive impact on many queer kids in an extremely fascinating way. I'm Ella Orchard-Blowen, and in this video essay, I will be exploring how the Riordanverse has had a positive influence on queer kids and their ability to come out. I hope you enjoy this exploration of queerness and YA literature, and thank you so much for watching. As I normally do, I will do my fit check, but also we're in a different spot again. I've been here in a previous video essay, but this is my bed in my room. I just like this setup for when I need to use, not natural lighting. I like it because it's casual and we get to sit and, have a little chat. But yeah, this is my bed. My computer is right here, as you can see. It's kind of blocked by the stack of books I have. But yeah, my computer is here. It has my script on it. I am going to look at my computer. I'm really sorry. I know that's kind of annoying. But it also kind of goes with my character that I'm emulating today, so I think that's okay. The character I'm trying to emulate today is Annabeth Chase from Percy Jackson, in case you couldn't tell, from the baseball hat and the Camp Half-Blood t-shirt. I've had this t-shirt since I was 12, 13 years old, and I also have owl earrings, but you can't really see them because Annabeth wears little owl earrings because she's a daughter of Athena, and then she also has her Yankees baseball cap of invisibility, and I have a Boston Red Sox cap that I dress up like her because that happens on a regular basis. But I left that at my home, not my apartment here at school. So I just had to improvise and use my hat from Galway, from when I studied abroad in Galway, which is cool. But yeah, it's not the hat I would normally use. And I know her hat's Yankees, but mine's Boston Red Sox because I'm from New England, and it's sacrilegious for me to wear Yankees. So Rick Riordan is the author of the Percy Jackson series, along with seemingly a million other series, all falling under the umbrella of the Riordanverse. Fans of Riordan's series have grown so attached to him that they have begun to refer to him as Uncle Rick on online fandom spaces and forums. But who is this beloved author exactly? I always think it's important to highlight the creator of media/literature that I am doing video essays on. So in this section, I'm going to explore Rick Riordan and why he has been so influential in the YA literature space. Riordan's Britannica entry states that Rick Riordan was born on June 5th, 1964 in San Antonio, Texas. Riordan attended the University of Texas and graduated with a bachelor's degrees in history and English. Riordan then earned his teacher's certification from the University of Texas at San Antonio, and he then began teaching middle school in Texas before moving to California, and he taught for around 15 years. I really want to highlight how Rick Riordan was a middle school teacher because I truly believe that the fact that Riordan was a middle school teacher is one of the reasons that his books are so successful with YA audiences, because his series features characters that seem like actual realistic YA characters. And I believe that Rick Riordan is so successful at writing YA characters because of his years teaching middle schoolers who are the same age as his characters. However, Riordan eventually stopped teaching to focus full-time on writing after successfully selling the Percy Jackson series to publishing houses. Where did Riordan get the inspiration to write the Percy Jackson series from? Well, on the official Rick Riordan website, there is an About section that features an interview with Rick Riordan. One of the questions is, where did you get the idea for Percy Jackson? To which Riordan answers with, my son Haley asked me to tell him some bedtime stories with the Greek gods and heroes. I taught Greek myths for many years at the middle school level, so I was glad to comply. When I ran out of myths, he was disappointed and asked me if I could make up something new with the same characters. I thought about it for a few minutes, then I remembered a creative writing project I used to do with my 6th graders. I would let them create their own demigod hero, the son or daughter of any god they wanted, and have them describe a Greek-style quest for that hero. Off the top of my head, I made it Percy Jackson and told Haley all about his quest to recover Zeus's lightning bolts in modern-day America. It took about 3 nights to tell the whole story, and when I was done, Haley told me I should write it out as a book. I think the fact that Rick Riordan wrote this series for his son only adds to the relatability of the story to YA readers. Riordan also discusses how he chose to make Percy have ADHD and dyslexia in this interview. When I was writing Percy Jackson, my own son was in the process of being tested for learning differences. He was having trouble reading and having trouble focusing in the classroom. The teachers were wondering about ADHD and dyslexia. Making Percy ADHD dyslexic was my way of honoring the potential of all the kids I've known who have those conditions. It's not a bad thing to be different. Sometimes it's the mark of being very, very talented. That's what Percy discovers about himself in The Lightning Thief. Riordan's inclusion of kids who are neurodivergent was revolutionary for the time and helped to make this series relatable to YA readers who may share diagnoses with the characters in the series, such as myself. The first book in the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series is The Lightning Thief, and it came out in 2005. I don't have my copy. It's at home. I have all of the Percy Jackson books, all of the Percy Jackson Olympian series books. I have all of the Heroes of Olympus books. I don't have all the Trials of Apollo books. But yeah, I have a lot of the Riordanverse books, but they're all at my house. All I have here is just these 3 bad boys that are right next to me. The book page on Riordan's official website gives a brief synopsis of the book. 12-year-old Percy Jackson is on the most dangerous quest of his life. With the help of a satyr and a daughter of Athena, Percy must journey across the United States to catch a thief who has stolen the original weapon of mass destruction, Zeus's Master Bolt. Along the way, he must face a host of mythological enemies determined to stop him. Most of all, he must come to terms with a father he has never known, and an oracle that has warned him of betrayal by a friend. This is obviously the first book in the series. This means that for a lot of YA readers, this was the moment that they fell in love with the series. Also, this was the moment that most of these readers started to connect and care about Percy and the other characters in the series. In this book, we, the readers, are introduced to the world of Camp Half-Blood and the concept of demigods, which I'm going to try to explain right now. Demigods, also known as half-bloods, are a mix of half-gods and half-mortals. They are mortal, however, because of their divine lineage, they possess some superhuman abilities. To dumb things down, a demigod has one parent who is a god/goddess, and their other parent is a mortal. Like in Percy's case, his dad is Poseidon and his mom is immortal, and he possesses water abilities because Poseidon is the god of the sea, so Percy inherited his abilities from his dad. Half-Blood is a summer camp for Greek demigods where these demigods can go to train and live. Demigods also typically have ADHD and dyslexia as part of their powers. The life of a demigod is pretty dangerous because once they reach a certain age, they start to give off this scent that attracts mythical monsters to them. These monsters want to kill these demigods and attempt to hunt them down. However, oftentimes these demigods will be tracked down by satyrs, who are good guys, who escort them to Camp Half-Blood, which is a safe space for demigods. All of this gets explained in the first book, and I'll try my best to explain things and provide context throughout this video essay whenever possible and whenever necessary, but yeah, it's really complex. I highly recommend reading the books if you have not. But yeah, I think that explains everything. First book is how we, as the readers, get introduced to Percy in the whole Riordanverse world. And Riordan does a great job making Percy relatable to the readers. Article Putting Characters First in a Middle School Classroom by Amanda Sass-Hinck. Sass-Hinck, who is a middle school English teacher, dives into why middle schoolers and YA readers seek out literature that features characters they are able to connect with. Sass-Hinck specifically mentions how she introduces literature and characters in her classroom, and how she fosters connections between her students and the characters from YA literature. Sass-Hinck uses Percy Jackson as a direct example of a YA series that features characters that YA readers connect with. As Sass-Hinck states, one of the most important aspects of developing a close personal relationship with literary characters is relevancy. Readers have to find something to connect with and characters to care about them, and for that connection to take place, stories and their characters have to be relevant in the eyes of an adolescent to the point where they can assign their own individual meaning. The reason why so many YA readers love the Percy Jackson series is because they're able to find something within this series to relate to, whether that be a specific character or a plot point. Riordan is successful at writing characters who YA readers are able to relate to and connect with, making these readers want to read the rest of the books in the series. By the end of my time reading Lightning Thief, I was so attached to the characters and the world in the book, and I was ready to consume the rest of the books in the series. To quote Sass-Hinck again, I asked the students about Percy at the end of the novel. They liked him, and the most common reason for liking him was because he seemed like a real kid. They saw how he changed from the beginning to the end. The characters in the Riordanverse felt like real kids dealing with real-world struggles along with battling mythical creatures, something I absolutely loved and still love. Lightning Thief is the first book in the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, which is the first series in the Riordanverse. After the success of the first book, Rick Riordan went on to write 4 more books, and this series became so successful that 2 terrible movie adaptations were made, along with the musical, and now a successful, accurate book adaptation TV series on Disney+. And getting back to the books, I already gave a brief synopsis of Lightning Thief, but I am not going to be able to cover this book in depth in this video essay because, as I said, this script is 30 pages long. However, I do think it's important to give context for the other books in the series because I'm covering the last book in the first series, which is Percy Jackson and the Last Olympian, which is this bad boy right here. The next book in this series is The Sea of Monsters, which I also am not going to be diving deep into in this video essay, but a brief synopsis of the second book is: when Thalia's tree is mysteriously poisoned, the magical borders of Camp Half-Blood begin to fail. Now Percy and his friends have just days to find the only magic item powerful enough to save the camp before it's overrun by monsters. The catch? They must sail into the Sea of Monsters to find it. Along the way, Percy must stage a daring rescue operation to save his old friend Grover, and he learns a terrible secret about his own family, which makes him question whether being the son of Poseidon is an honor or a curse. Obviously, a lot of random characters' names are mentioned in both of these synopses that I have provided, and if I were to break down and explain every single character, then we would be here for hours, but we will be discussing specific characters later on in this video essay. The third book in the series is The Titan's Curse, and the synopsis is, when Percy Jackson gets an urgent distress call from his friend Grover, he immediately prepares for battle. He knows he will need his powerful demigod allies at his side, his trusty bronze sword Riptide, and a ride from his mom. Brief jumping in. Percy is 12 in the first book in Lightning Thief. So he's 13 in the second one, he's 14 in the third one, which I'm talking about right now. Then he's 15 in the fourth one, and then he's 15 turning 16 in the fifth one. So just for context, that is ages. The demigods rush to the rescue to find that Grover has made an important discovery: two powerful half-bloods whose parentage is unknown. But that's not all that awaits them. The Titan Lord Kronos has devised his most treacherous plot yet, and the young heroes have just fallen prey. They're not the only ones in danger. An ancient monster has arisen, one rumored to be so powerful it could destroy Olympus. And Artemis, the only goddess who might know how to track it, is missing. Now Percy and his friends, along with the hunters of Artemis, have only a week to find the kidnapped goddess and solve the mystery of the monster she was hunting. Along the way, they must face their most dangerous challenges yet, the chilling prophecy of the Titan's Curse. Don't you guys want to read all these books? The fourth book in this series is The Battle of the Labyrinth. And the synopsis is, Percy Jackson isn't expecting freshman orientation to be any fun, but when a mysterious mortal acquaintance appears, pursued by demon cheerleaders, things quickly go from bad to worse. Time is running out for Percy. War between the gods and the Titans is drawing near. Even Camp Half-Blood isn't safe, as Kronos' army prepares to invade its once impenetrable borders. To stop them, Percy and his friends must set out on a quest through the labyrinth, a sprawling underground world with surprises and danger at every turn. Along the way, Percy will confront powerful enemies, find out the truth about the lost god Pan, and face the Titan Lord Kronos' most terrible secret. The final war begins, ... with the Battle of the Labyrinth. The fifth and final book in the series is The Last Olympian, which is one of the books I will be focusing on in this video. As I have previously stated, this is the last book in the first series, Percy Jackson and the Olympians. The synopsis on the back of the book is, all year the Half-Bloods have been preparing for battle against the Titans, knowing that the odds of victory are grim. Kronos' army is stronger than ever, and with every god and half-blood he recruits, the evil Titan's power only grows. While the Olympians struggle to contain the rampaging monster Typhon, Kronos begins his advance on New York City, where Mount Olympus stands, virtually unguarded. Now it's up to Percy Jackson and an army of young demigods to stop the Lord of Time. In this momentous final book in the New York Times best-selling series, the long-awaited prophecy surrounding Percy's 16th birthday unfolds. And as the battle for Western civilization rages on the streets of Manhattan, Percy faces a terrifying suspicion that he may be fighting against his own fate. Essentially, the whole series has been leading up to this point. And as much as I want to dive into each book and explain it all, time is a constraint. But essentially in this book, the demigods of Camp Half-Blood fighting against the big bad of the first series, which is Kronos. I highly recommend reading this series for more context because I know I definitely am not providing enough. But Percy is leading the charge, and all his demigod friends are by his side, and two of those demigods that I want to focus on are Clarisse LaRue and Silena Beauregard. We can plant a memory. Clarisse LaRue is one of the many demigods who attends Camp Half-Blood. She is the daughter of Ares, who is the god of war, and in The Last Olympian, she is the head counselor of the Ares cabin. Clarisse is known for being generally hot-tempered, arrogant, brave, and strong like most of her siblings. She is also known as a bully that dunks new campers' heads in toilets.
Some kids gotta learn the hard way.
Clarisse is originally introduced in Lightning Thief, and she is kind of a bully to Percy. However, throughout the series, she grows a lot as a character. In a Battle of the Labyrinth, Clarisse forms a connection and seemingly develops a crush on another demigod, Chris Rodriguez. And the two eventually begin dating during the course of Battle of the Labyrinth. However, I am not focusing on this couple in this video essay. I am focusing on queer couples. During this small period of time in between Battle of the Labyrinth and The Last Olympian, Clarisse becomes really close with another demigod, Silena Beauregard. Silena Beauregard is a daughter of Aphrodite, who's the goddess of love, and the head counselor of the Aphrodite cabin. Silena is also dating another demigod, Charles Beckendorf, at the beginning of The Last Olympian. Silena isn't introduced until The Sea of Monsters, but she is one of the more main side characters throughout the first series. Silena is known for being to be kind and caring to the other campers. Percy once described her as being one of the nicest girls in the Aphrodite cabin, far less shallow and conceited than most of her cabin mates, also saying that Silena was a neat freak. There is so much more to explore about Silena's and Clarisse's characters, and trust we will. At the beginning of The Last Olympian, Beckendorf, Silena's boyfriend, and Percy go on a mission to the Princess Andromeda, which is a ship that the enemies, aka the Titans, are using as kind of a home base. From a distance, you'd think it was just a party ship, not the headquarters for the Titan Lord. Beckendorf and Percy sneak onto the ship to spy on Kronos, who is the Titan Lord. Riordanverse, the Titans, who are the parents of the Olympians, aka the Greek gods that we all know and love, are immortal beings, and Kronos was their king. The Titans were eventually overthrown by the Olympians in Greek mythology, and that's when Zeus became king of the gods. In Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the Titans are the big bads, specifically Kronos. Kronos possesses the body of a demigod, Luke Castellan, which I'm not going to even get into because, again, that's a whole nother video essay on its own. Kronos uses Luke to help him assemble an army of Titans to help him overthrow the Olympians and win back power. The entirety of the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series is leading up to this big battle in The Last Olympian. Which gets me back to what we were originally talking about. Beckendorf and Percy sneak onto the ship, and they plant a bomb that Beckendorf made because he is a son of Hephaestus, who's the god of forges, fire, craftsmanship, all that jazz. However, the two boys get captured by the Titans while aboard, and things get bad. Beckendorf has a watch on his wrist that will detonate the bomb, and he ends up detonating the bomb and telling Percy to go. The Princess Andromeda blew up from both sides, a massive fireball of green flame reeling into the dark sky, consuming everything. Beckendorf, I thought. Beckendorf sadly dies in this explosion, and Percy survives because of his water powers. He just jumps into the ocean and he's fine. He can breathe underwater. Eventually, Percy makes his way back to Camp Half-Blood and has to break the news that Beckendorf died to all the other demigods, which absolutely devastates Silena. She started to cry, and the rest of us stood around, too stunned to speak. All the other demigods aren't sure what to do to help Silena, but then Clarisse appears. Finally, Clarisse from the Ares cabin came forward. She put her arm around Silena. They had one of the strangest friendships ever, a daughter of the war god and a daughter of the love goddess. But ever since Silena had given Clarisse advice last summer about her first boyfriend, Clarisse had decided she was Silena's personal bodyguard. This is one of the first moments we hear about Silena and Clarisse's close bond. And Percy Jackson and the Olympians, Percy is the sole narrator, so we only get to hear and see things through his perspective. This is the moment where Percy highlights their bond and how unusual their friendship is. In many ways, Silena and Clarisse are complete opposites, yet they have a very genuine and sweet relationship, which Percy comments on more. She, Clarisse, was as big and beefy as a rugby player, with a permanent scowl on her face, but she spoke gently to Silena. "Come on, girl," she said, "let's go to the big house. I'll make you some hot chocolate." In the first series, Clarisse is established to be a very hard-headed, angry, not often sweet character, which is why it is so noticeable how kind she is with Silena. I also think it's important to point out that in mythology, Ares and Aphrodite, Clarisse and Silena's godly parents, are lovers. However, this doesn't impact their children and their abilities to have relationships because the gods don't have blood, and they are all actually related, which Percy explains in the book. Aren't all demigods related on the godly side, and doesn't that make dating gross? But the thing is, the godly side of your family doesn't count, genetically speaking, since gods don't have DNA. A demigod would never think about dating someone who had the same godly parent. But I wouldn't say things are explicitly queer yet between Silena and Clarisse in the text. They just seem to be really good friends. Wink, wink. If I could wink, I would. But after announcing that Beckendorf is dead, all the other campers wander off, and the next time we see Clarisse and Silena is when all the head counselors have a meeting. Each Greek god has a cabin at camp where their children reside. Each cabin has a head counselor. Typically, the head counselor is one of the oldest campers in the cabin and or the camper who has been there the longest. Percy, because he is the only demigod child of Poseidon, because prophecy and all of that, again, complicated stuff we're not going to get into, is the head counselor of his cabin. When Percy walks into the head counselor meeting, he sees Clarisse fighting with another head counselor. She was in the midst of yelling at Michael Yu, the new head counselor of Apollo. Selena is also at this meeting, and Percy notices how checked out she is. Only Selena Beauregard didn't pay any attention. She sat beside Clarisse and stared vacantly at the ping-pong net. Her eyes were red and puffy. Eventually, Percy tells Clarisse and Michael to stop fighting, and he also asks what is going on, which doesn't get explained. Instead, Clarisse continues to argue and states, "The only reason I'm here is to support Selena." I point this out because Clarisse herself is stating that she is only at the meeting for her bestie. Percy continues to be confused on what is going on, but Clarisse continues to argue, and she gets so frustrated that she leaves the meeting, but not before saying, Clarisse turned to Selena. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get onto this when you've just lost. Anyway, I apologize. To you. Nobody else." The idea that Clarisse is only sweet and gentle with Selena is reinforced yet again, which I think is significant. Clarisse is known for not being the most gentle with every other camper. Sure, she has moments where she can be kind, but overall she is known for being standoffish, except for with Selena. There's something special about Selena that Clarisse clearly admires, which in my opinion is really queer. He does learn about what Clarisse is so fired up about from his bestie. They're way more than besties. They just aren't dating yet. And Annabeth Chase, more on her later, but she's me. I'm her. Her and I we're literally the same person. Tells him during a raid that was led by the Ares cabin, the Apollo cabin seized a flying chariot. The two cabins are fighting over the chariot because they both feel that they have ownership over it, which is why Clarisse is so angry and upset. And she also feels that her cabin is being treated unfairly by all the other cabins. And the next time we see Clarisse and Selena is when all the demigods are burning Beckendorf's shroud, which is a demigod tradition for any demigod that dies. It's like a funeral of sorts. Selena, of course, is there. Selena sat nearby crying, while Clarisse and her boyfriend Chris Rodriguez tried to comfort her. Poor Chris is third-wheeling Clarisse and Selena, and again, Selena and Clarisse are consistently seen together, and they seem to never be apart in this book, which tries to confront Selena, but he seemingly only makes things worse, and Selena gets up to leave, and Clarisse asks if she wants her to come with. "You want company?" Clarisse asked. Selena shook her head and ran off. "She's stronger than she looks," Clarisse muttered, almost to herself. "She'll survive." She's reassuring herself that Selena will be okay, because she cares about her so much, and she's in love with her. Percy then tries to convince Clarisse to join all the other demigods and fight against the Titans, because part of Clarisse leaving the meeting was her being I'm not fighting with you guys. I'm not going to battle with you guys. I'm not going to go with you guys and join you guys. I'm done. The Ares cabin is done until you guys give us some respect. Clarisse refuses because she feels that her cabin is continuously being made fun of. Chris sides with Percy, and Clarisse gets angry and walks away from both of them. Percy continues to get ready for the big battle against the Titans, and eventually it all leads up to the Battle of Manhattan, which is the big battle. Mount Olympus is above the Empire State Building, and Camp Half-Blood is on Long Island, so Percy Jackson is very set in New York and New York City. The demigods from Camp Half-Blood pull up to Manhattan. A bunch of campers climbed out, some of them looking a little green from the long drive. I was glad so many had come. Pollux, Selena Beauregard. The Ares cabin wasn't here, but I tried not to get too angry about it. Clarisse was a stubborn idiot. The camp joins in on the battle, but Clarisse and the rest of her cabin remain back at camp because they are stubborn. Battle goes on, invasions, fighting, and Annabeth gets slightly injured, but she is ultimately fine. Percy checks on her. She is in the Plaza Hotel, which the demigods took over as kind of a home base. Selena is there helping to take care of Annabeth, and she apologizes to Percy and Annabeth. "This is all my fault." Annabeth and Percy are confused and ask her to explain. "I've never been any good at camp," she murmured. "Not like you or Percy. If I was a better fighter." Both Annabeth and Percy attempt to reassure her, and Percy states, "And you get along with people, believe me. Anyone who can make friends with Clarisse has talents." This gives Selena an idea. She stared at me like I'd just given her an idea. "That's it! We need the Ares cabin. I can talk to Clarisse. I know I can convince her to help us." "Whoa, Selena, even if you could get off the island, Clarisse is pretty stubborn once she gets angry." "Please," Selena said, "I can take a Pegasus. I know I can make it back to camp." I think the way that Selena is so desperate to go get Clarisse is extremely telling about the nature of their relationship. She's practically begging to go get Clarisse. I can't help but highlight how sure she is that she can convince Clarisse to come join the fight. It's almost as if she knows that Clarisse would come back just for her. Silena leaves to go convince Clarisse to come back, and the battle rages on. A bunch of monsters start to invade the city, and one of them is a Dracon, who is prophesied to only be killed by a child of Ares. Again, we're skipping a bunch of context. I'm so sorry. Which of course is bad because none of the kids from the Ares cabin are there. So Percy thinks they're screwed until he hears a girl's voice yelled, "Ares!" And the Ares cabin finally arrives at the battle, led by Clarisse. "Ares, to me!" Clarisse screamed. Her voice sounded shriller than usual, but I guess that wasn't surprised given what she was fighting. Clarisse starts to fight the Dracon, but things start to go very wrong, and Percy slowly realizes that Clarisse is not there. Through her helmet, I could only see her eyes, but I could tell that something was wrong. Her blue eyes shone with fear. Clarisse never looked like that, and she didn't have blue eyes. Fake Clarisse then gets poison spit in her face by the Dracon, and Percy tries to distract the Dracon when the real Clarisse appears. Clarisse was laying on the ground where she'd fallen, her armor smoked with poison. Annabeth and the Ares campers were trying to unfasten her helmet, and kneeling next to them, her face blotchy with tears, was a girl in camp clothes. It was Clarisse. Percy is obviously confused by this, but he slowly realizes that it was never Clarisse in the armor. And Clarisse is asking whoever is in the armor, "Why?" the real Clarisse demanded, holding the other girl in her arms. The Dracon then tries to attack the real Clarisse, but she grabs her spear and kills it. Then finally, Annabeth removes the helmet from the girl dressed as Clarisse. Her features, once beautiful, were badly burned from poison. I could tell that no amount of nectar or ambrosia would save her. I looked down at the dying face of Silena Beauregard. It revealed that Silena stole Clarisse's armor and went into battle for her, and they have a very intimate scene together. Clarisse and Silena do. "What were you thinking?" Clarisse cradled Selena's head in her lap. Silena tried to swallow, but her lips were dry and cracked. "Wouldn't listen. Cabin would only follow you." "So you stole my armor?" Clarisse said in disbelief. "You waited until Chris and I went out on patrol? You stole my armor and pretended to be me?" She glared at her siblings. "And none of you noticed?" The Ares campers developed a sudden interest in their combat boots. "Don't blame them," Silena said. "They wanted to believe I was you." "You stupid Aphrodite girl," Clarisse sobbed. "You charged a Dracon. Why?" "All my fault," Silena said, tears streaking the side of her face. "The Dracon, Charlie's death, camp endangered." "Stop it," Clarisse said. "That's not true." Then revealed that Silena was a spy for Luke/Kronos. However, it was only because Luke/Kronos heavily manipulated her and Loki forced her to be a spy. So that can all be easily forgiven. Again, I'm glossing over a lot of context, but yeah, there was a spy for, like, inside of camp who was, like, spying on the demigods and then, like, reporting back to Kronos/Luke, which is why, like, things were happening, and Percy caught on that there was a spy, like, early on in the book. Find out that Silena was the spy, which is, like, obviously so tragic. Silena and Clarisse continue being tragic lovers. Silena took a heavy, painful breath. "Forgive me," and this is after they found out she's a spy. "You're not dying," Clarisse insisted. "Charlie," Selena's eyes were a million miles away. "See, Charlie." She didn't speak again. Clarisse held her and wept. Silena literally dies in Clarisse's arms after sacrificing herself for Clarisse. Sure, Selena's last words were about seeing her dead boyfriend, but her relationship with Clarisse cannot be ignored. In my opinion, Clarisse and Silena have a very queer relationship, and I am not the only one who thinks that. They are actually a very popular ship in the fandom. They are definitely one of the top queer ships from the first series in the Riordanverse, and for a lot of young queer readers, their relationship was an awakening. They're classic tragic queer lovers, and many people have pointed out the parallel between Silena and Clarisse, and Patroclus and Achilles. As the wiki page for them states, this ship parallels Patroclus and Achilles from Greek mythology, with Silena being Patroclus and Clarisse being Achilles. Both Achilles and Clarisse are callous and prideful towards others, but tender and gentle with one other person, Patroclus and Silena respectively. They both refuse to fight in a war for whatever reason, while Patroclus and Silena both wear the other's armor to fight in said war. When Patroclus dies, Achilles returns to the battlefield for the sole reason of avenging him, dragging his killer Hector's corpse by the heels behind his chariot. Clarisse does the same, joining the battle to avenge Silena, killing and dragging the Dracon that had killed Silena behind her with her chariot. Tragic queer couples are a cornerstone in Greek mythology. I could go on and on about this relationship, but this script is 30 pages long, so I need to move on to my favorite ship and my queer awakening. But yeah, that is the queer ship from Percy Jackson and the Olympians, which is the first series, and like the Percy Jackson series, their queerness is contained to this book only, sadly, but there's a literal direct parallel between them and Achilles and Petroleus, which is like an infamous queer ship. Next book series in the Riordanverse is the Heroes of Olympus, a sequel to Percy Jackson and the Olympians. There are 5 books in this series, and it's my favorite Riordanverse series. The first book in the series is The Lost Hero, which is kind of a direct sequel to The Last Olympian, although in a subversive way. The Lost Hero came out in 2010, so I don't want to make this script ridiculously long because it already is, but I do want to give context for the series. The series centers around this prophecy that was given at the end of The Last Olympian after Percy defeats Kronos. 7 half-bloods shall answer the call. To storm or fire the world must fall, an oath to keep with the final breath, and foes bear arms to the doors of death. As the prophecy hints, there are 7 half-bloods as the focus of this series. Percy Jackson, Annabeth Chase, Jason Grace, Piper McLean, Leo Valdez, Frank Zhang, and Hazel Levesque. But in this video essay, we are only going to be focusing on Annabeth and Piper. Lost Hero introduces us to Jason, Piper, and Leo, and it's split perspective from the 3 of them all narrating. Piper and Annabeth also officially meet each other in this book, which I will briefly discuss in the next section. But the trio of Jason, Piper, and Leo all go on a quest and bond in this book. In the next book, The Son of Neptune, we are introduced to Hazel and Frank, and we finally see Percy again, although without his memories. It is also in this book that we get introduced to Camp Jupiter, the Roman equivalent to Camp Half-Blood. Yes, there are Roman demigods too. Jason, Hazel, Frank are all Roman demigods. Percy, Hazel, and Frank all go on a quest, and this book also features all of their perspectives. All of the books in Heroes of Olympus are split perspectives, which is part of why I love it so much. At the end of The Son of Neptune, a flying ship named the Argo II arrives at Camp Jupiter. On the ship are Annabeth, Piper, Jason, Leo, and their adult supervisor, Coach Hedge, who's a satyr, who just accompanies them and makes sure they don't die, because they are all minors, because Annabeth is 16, Piper, Jason, Leo are all 15, Hazel and Frank are 14, maybe? No, Hazel and Frank are 15? I don't know. They're younger than Annabeth and Percy. Annabeth and Percy are the oldest, and they're both 16. Eventually, Leo built this ship, and he's a son of Hephaestus, and yeah, the ship is to carry around the 7 demigods from the prophecy of, the 7, around to complete their quest. The Son of Neptune ends with the Argo II arriving in New Rome, which is where Camp Jupiter is located. And the third book in the series, The Mark of Athena, which is the one I will be focusing on, picks up right where The Son of Neptune ends. Okay, we're finally going to get into my favorite Riordanverse book, The Mark of Athena. Mark of Athena is also split perspective, and it features POV chapters from Annabeth Chase, my favorite, Leo Valdez, Piper McLean, and Percy Jackson. Annabeth and Percy are obviously both in the first series, with Percy being the title character and Annabeth being one of the mainish characters, although everything is narrated from Percy's perspective. Annabeth Chase is originally introduced in The Lightning Thief, and as I have previously stated, she is my favorite character from the series and from all of the Riordanverse. She is also one of my favorite characters of all time, and I see a lot of myself in her. Annabeth is a daughter of Athena, goddess of wisdom, and so much more. Annabeth is described as Annabeth is an intellectual genius, wise, and very witty. Her eyes look calculating, like she is analyzing whoever she is looking at during a first meet, as if thinking of the best way to take the person down in a fight. She loves architecture and spends her free time designing new buildings or visiting national monuments. She has a soft side for those who seek knowledge. She sometimes gets too philosophical. Annabeth is very strong-minded and stubborn, shown to be incredibly determined and daring. When I first read the series, I was instantly so drawn to Annabeth, and a part of that could be because Athena has always been my favorite Greek god of all time. I could go on and on about Athena and Annabeth. For time's sake, I won't. Annabeth grows up alongside Percy throughout Percy Jackson and the Olympians, and she is 16 in The Mark of Athena, and then she turns 17 in the next book. Annabeth and Percy become best friends in the first series, and then eventually things grow romantic between them, and they end The Last Olympian kissing and becoming boyfriend and girlfriend, basically. However, Percy goes missing after the events of The Last Olympian, and Annabeth goes searching for him, and all of this sets off the events of the Heroes of Olympus. The other character in this ship is Piper McLean, who is introduced in The Lost Hero. She is introduced as Jason Grace's girlfriend, although Jason has no memories at the beginning of the book and he doesn't remember Piper, similar to how Percy doesn't have any memories in Son of Neptune. Eventually, Piper and Jason do actually start dating for real at the end of The Lost Hero. Piper is a daughter of Aphrodite, just like Silena, and she is described as Piper McLean is shown to be very self-conscious, but generally calm, intuitive, and caring young woman. Piper just dislikes the general attitude and preconceptions attributed to her due to her appearance/wealth, which is why she explicitly chooses to appear as plain-looking as she can. Piper occasionally lets her worries take over, which cause her to mentally isolate herself and to believe she is without help and singular in her struggles. Piper is sometimes hated on by people in the fandom, but I do genuinely love her. I think she's a complex character and still understand her. Piper also possesses the ability to charm speak. Piper has the power of charm speak, which allowed her to influence others with enhanced vocal persuasiveness. Something interesting about charm speak within this series is that it is more powerful when the person that you're charm speaking to is attracted to you, which will come up later. Annabeth and Piper first meet in The Lost Hero, when Annabeth arrives in a chariot at the Grand Canyon, which is where Leo, Jason, and Piper are all on a field trip. Chaos ensues, and Annabeth ends up taking the 3 demigods with her on her chariot, and the blonde girl Annabeth adjusted a bronze navigation device. That's from Piper's first POV chapter, and that's what she thinks of Annabeth. That's all she says about Annabeth. But yeah, Annabeth and Piper are going to have a few more interactions in this book that I briefly want to highlight because they build up to their eventual best friendship. When the chariot of demigods finally arrive at Camp Half-Blood, they are quickly surrounded by all the other campers. And one of the campers, the new head counselor of the Aphrodite cabin, because Silena died, Drew, makes some rude comments towards Piper, and Piper is about to fight her when Annabeth says, "Piper, stop." Piper thinks to herself, Piper did. She wasn't a bit scared of Drew, but Annabeth didn't seem like somebody she wanted for an enemy. And instantly, Piper knows that she wants to befriend Annabeth. Annabeth then takes Piper on a tour of camp, and the two girls bond even more. "You have friends here. We've all been through a lot of weird stuff. We know what you're going through." That's Annabeth talking to Piper. "I've been kicked out of 5 different schools the past 5 years," she said. "My dad's running out of places to put me." "Only 5? Annabeth didn't sound like she was teasing. "Piper, we've all been labeled troublemakers. I ran away from home when I was 7. After the girls bond, Annabeth has a moment of sadness when she thinks about how long Percy has been gone, which then leads to the two girls both discussing their boyfriends and their boyfriend troubles, which in my opinion is really queer. I know it doesn't seem like it, but they have a shared moment of understanding because they both have seemingly lost their boyfriends in some way, right? You know, Jason doesn't have his memories, which his memories were fake anyways, but you know what I mean. Annabeth then brings Piper to the shed where they store all the weapons at camp so Piper can pick out a weapon. There's a moment where Annabeth seems to almost see through Piper, which scares her and also hints at Piper's potential queerness. Annabeth's gray eyes were unnerving as the dagger blade. She seemed to be calculating a million possibilities, trying to read Piper's thoughts. The two girls then eventually continue their tour, and Piper thinks that her and Annabeth could be great friends. Other things happen, but at one point Piper admits that she secretly hopes her godly parent is Athena, so her and Annabeth could be sisters. And another character agrees. "I think Annabeth is hoping that too. You guys are a lot alike." Obviously they aren't sisters, thank God. But I think it's interesting how both girls hope that they are. They met, and then they instantly felt this connection, and they chalk it up to just being similar or being sisters. We're a lot alike. Kiss each other. Eventually, Piper gets claimed by Aphrodite, which transforms her. A stunned Annabeth pointed at Piper's dagger. Stared at her reflection in the polished metal blade. Her hair was perfect, lush and long and chocolate brown, braided with gold ribbons down one side so it fell across her shoulder. She even wore makeup, better than Piper would ever know how to do herself. Subtle touches that made her lips cherry red and brought out all the different colors in her eyes. I think it's noticeable how Annabeth is stunned by Piper's transformation, almost as if she is taken aback by Piper's beauty. Now, eventually, Piper, Jason, and Leo all embark on their quest, and we don't get any more Piper-Beth, which is their ship name, moments in The Lost Hero. However, we get plenty in the Mark of Athena, and I don't even cover all of them because I was getting stressed out because I hit like 20-something pages, and I was like, this script is too long. And this book begins with an Annabeth POV chapter. Annabeth is standing on the deck of the Argo II as they fly into Camp Jupiter, and the rest of the demigods aboard the ship are all preparing for their arrival, and Annabeth notices Piper preparing. Piper paced back and forth between the main mast and the bow state, practicing her lines. "Lower your weapons," she murmured. "We just want to talk." Her charm speak was so powerful, the words flowed over Annabeth, filling her with the desire to drop her dagger and have a nice long chat. Remember how we talked about Charmspeak earlier? This is the first time in the Riordanverse that we get Annabeth's POV, and it's really revealing. This line may seem inconsequential, but it's actually the basis of their entire queer relationship, in my opinion. Because this line confirms that Piper's Charmspeak works on Annabeth. And that means that Annabeth is attracted Piper. To remind you, Piper's Charmspeak works on people, it works on people who are not attracted to her, but it works the best on people who are attracted to her. And that is canon. That is canon. Beth then goes on to comment on Piper's beauty. For a child of Aphrodite, Piper tried hard her beauty. Today she was dressed in tattered jeans, worn-out sneakers, and a white tank top with pink Hello Kitty designs. Maybe as a joke, though Annabeth could never be sure with Piper. Her choppy brown hair was braided down the right side with an eagle's feather. Again, Annabeth is noticing all these little things about Piper and is clearly well aware of her beauty. She says Piper tries hard to play down her beauty. So, oh my god, the Argo 2 reaches New Rome, and Annabeth is reunited with Percy, and Hazel and Frank officially join the group. Then chaos breaks out, and the Seven have to quickly leave. The Seven is all together, though, which is good, which is, the seven demigods, which I've previously mentioned. So they all begin sailing off on their quest. Obviously, the three new demigods aboard the ship add new dynamics to the group, and Piper clocks this in one of her POV chapters when she sees Annabeth and Percy standing next to each other. And it's kind of like a moment of jealousy too. Piper was happy to see Annabeth with a sparkle in her eyes because Piper had never had a better friend. For months, Annabeth had been tormenting herself, her every waking moment consumed with the search for Percy. Again, it's reiterated how these two are best friends, but there is also this underlying jealousy that lingers whenever they both see each other with their boyfriends. Two girls then interact. So, Annabeth plucked the bagel out of Piper's hand and took a bite, but that didn't bother Piper. Back at camp, they'd had this running joke about stealing each other's breakfast. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't think it was funny if one of my best friends took food out of my hand and ate it. I don't know why, but to me this feels very much like an inside joke that a couple would have. Piper then watches Annabeth and Percy together and thinks they were so easy together, it made Piper's heart ache. But as she chalks it up, she's like, it's just because, I wish things were easier with Jason. And it's because you're gay, which, is actually canonically true. This is a clear moment of Piper being jealous over Annabeth and Percy's relationship, in my opinion. There are multiple more moments between the two girls, shared looks. Annabeth looked at her sympathetically, as if to say, boys are so clueless. But the next big Piper Beth moment is when Piper is thinking about the lines from the prophecy and hoping that Jason doesn't die. But she, I don't want him to die, I don't want him to die. And she worries that, saying that may have cursed another one of the seven to die. And one of them is going to have to die because of the lines in the prophecy, which, does happen, but then they, subvert it. It's a whole thing. But she then worries about the pain that one of them dying will cause. How could she stand to see Annabeth in that kind of pain if Percy died? Again, there's all these little moments. It's the way that Piper couldn't stand to see Annabeth get hurt because she cares so much about her. It feels kind of gay. Then there's another moment of Annabeth appreciating Piper's beauty. Piper leaned against the control panel. She'd done her braid with white feathers today, which looked good with her dark brown hair. Annabeth wondered how she found the time. Annabeth could barely remember to brush her hair. I'm not saying that you can't compliment people without being attracted to them. Obviously, you can compliment someone and be like, I'm not attracted to you at all. I just admiring your beauty. But I am saying that it's noticeable the amount of time that Annabeth spends on Piper's looks in her POV chapters. And what fuels the Annabeth Chase queer allegations even more is when Piper, Hazel, and Annabeth go on a side quest to see Aphrodite in Charleston, South Carolina. When Annabeth sees Aphrodite, she thinks. Annabeth gasped. The woman was breathtakingly beautiful and strangely familiar. Her face was hard to describe. Her features seemed to shift from those of one glamorous movie star to another. Her eyes sparkled playfully, sometimes green or blue or amber. Her hair changed from long, straight blonde to dark chocolatey curls. Annabeth was instantly jealous. She'd always wished she had dark hair. It is established in the canon of the Riordanverse that Aphrodite appears to people as what they are attracted to, for the most part. Right? I think it's significant that Aphrodite appears to Annabeth as a woman with multicolored eyes and dark brown hair, just like Piper. Piper canonically has multicolored eyes and dark brown hair. I also think it's important to point out how Annabeth wishes she had dark hair. There's often this saying or belief in the woman-loving woman community, or just queer community in general, but I know specifically in the woman-loving woman community because I know about that, of the do I want to be her or do I want to be with her mentality of oh, I really, really like this woman. Do I want to be her? Do I want to be with her? And it's figuring that out as a is a really good way to figure out if you're gay or not. I feel like this is a perfect example of that. I fear that I could go on and on about Beth and Mark of Athena, because they mean so much to me and they truly were my bisexual awakening. But this script is 30 pages long, and I did do a good chunk of this book, and there are moments in this book that was just a brief overview of their queerness in this book. Okay, finally moving on to the last Riordanverse book in this video. The Sun and the Star came out in 2023, and it focuses on Nico D'Angelo, and is part of a new sequel series, the Nico D'Angelo Adventures. D'Angelo is a beloved character in the Riordanverse, and was the first openly gay character in the Riordanverse. Nico D'Angelo is introduced in the Titan's Curse, and he's the son of Hades, god of the underworld. He becomes the main character at the end of Percy Jackson, the Olympians, the book series, and then he plays a major role in the Heroes of Olympus. Nico is super young in Titan's Curse, around old, and he's around 13, 14 in Heroes of Olympus, so he's like 15 in this book. Nico is described as, Nico is plagued by incredible internal pain. Nico apparently also has tremendous, virtually indomitable willpower, since he's able to survive in Tartarus on his own, while seeing the place in all of its ineffable horrors for the entire time that he spent there. Nico admits that even when he didn't want to let people believe that he was anything but a ball of darkness, he deep down wanted to have friends and be cared for. It's just that he had been unable to let go of all the hurt and pain that he had been in. Nico is forcibly outed by Cupid in the house of Hades, which is the fourth book in the Heroes of Olympus and the sequel to the Mark of Athena. That book came out in 2013, which was 2 years before same-sex marriage was legalized in the United States, which was like a big deal for the queer community. In many ways, Riordan was ahead of his time. In the fifth and final book of Heroes of Olympus, The Blood of Olympus, Nico has multiple seemingly romantic interactions with another demigod, Will Solace. Interactions lead to the two boys developing a romantic relationship in between series, but in the next series, The Trials of Apollo, which I'm not covering because I don't like, it's confirmed that they are together. Will Solace is introduced in The Last Olympian, and he's the son of Apollo, god of the sun, healing, music, and so much more. Literally, like, so much. Will is also the head counselor of the Apollo cabin and the head medic/healer at camp. Will, I think, is a year older than Nico, and is described as, Will is a caring person who is willing to help out anyone who needs to be healed. He cares greatly for his siblings. Because of seeing himself as only a healer, Will appears to often underestimate just how powerful he really is, even if his powers aren't usually as flashy as his siblings. With a tendency to overwork himself, Will is extremely dedicated to his work, even going so far as to not sleep for days on end. He has also developed a kind of shell, meaning that even in extremely stressful situations, he at least looks calm and collected. They tend to be described as a very black cat and yellow cat relationship, Will and Nico do. Sun and the Star is centered around them and their relationship. However, they do appear as a couple in the Trials of Apollo, but in The Sun and the Star, they are the main characters. It is from Nico's perspective, like we don't have Will's perspective, but they are the main characters. Synopsis for The Sun and the Star on Rick Riordan's website is, as the son of Hades, Nico D'Angelo has been through so much, from the premature deaths of his mother and sister, to being outed against his will, to losing his friend Jason during the Trials of Apollo. But there is a ray of sunshine in his life, literally, his boyfriend, Will Solace, the son of Apollo. Together, the two demigods can overcome any obstacle or foe. At least that's been the case so far. Now Nico is being plagued by a voice calling out to him from Tartarus, the lowest part of the underworld. He thinks he knows who it is, a reformed titan named Bob, whom Percy and Annabeth had to leave behind when they escaped Hades' realm, which is what happens in the House of Hades. Sorry, spoiler alert. Nico's dream and Rachel Dare's latest prophecy leave little doubt in Nico's mind that Bob is in some kind of trouble. Nico has to go on this quest, whether Mr. D and Chiron like it or not. And of course, Will insists on coming with. But can a being made of light survive in the darkest part of the world? And what does this prophecy mean that Nico will have to leave something of equal value behind? Nico will have to face demons both internal and external as his relationship with Will is tested to the core in this standalone adventure featuring two of the most popular characters in the Percy Jackson saga. It's not actually a standalone, there is a sequel that has been made. So yeah. Obviously, because this book centers around two queer characters, it is very explicitly queer, unlike the other two books I mentioned. in this video essay. In my opinion, this is great because there should be explicitly queer YA literature. And a lot of this book centers around Nico coming to terms with the fact that he is capable of love, which I think is such an important theme to focus on in YA literature, especially when it comes to queer YA characters. I think that's perfectly highlighted in this quote. Why, oh why did it feel like such a victory to make Will laugh? For a long time, Nico had assumed he himself did not have a heart. He was the son of Hades after all. Love didn't find people like him. But then came Will. Will, who could melt Nico's iciness with a smile. Anyone could have guessed which god was Will's father. He radiated energy and light, sometimes literally, as they learned in the caverns earlier that year. Will was Apollo's son, through and through. Again, you are. I really don't want to spoil this book, because it's more recent than the other ones. We want to highlight it and mention how impactful it is for Riordan to have queer characters as the main characters in his YA series, especially queer characters who are realizing it's okay to be queer throughout the book. Another great quote from this book is, he'd grown up in a time and place where people like him, well, they just didn't have love songs. In a roundabout way, his experience in the Lotus Hotel had allowed him to end up here, where this was possible. Nico had a boyfriend, but that was the dichotomy of his life. The 70 years they'd spent at the Lotus Hotel had protected Bianca and Nico. Him and his sister stay in the Lotus Hotel, which, like, time doesn't exist in, and, like, you don't age if you go there, for 70 years. And I really don't want to spoil this book because it is so recent, and a sequel to this book just came out this year, The Court of the Dead. I have not read it yet. I need to. I really want to. I need to get it. But yeah, I do. I really highly recommend you read this. That's another reason why I really don't want to spoil it. I really highly recommend you read this. I highly recommend you read all of the Percy Jackson books. I know I spoiled a lot of them too, but my thing with spoiling is, like, if it's been a decade, I think it's okay to spoil media and literature because it's like it's been a decade. I'm also cutting this section short because of time, because I fear we've been here for a while and we still have another section to go, but it's just one more, and then my sources. But yeah, we've been here for a long time, and this script ended up being, like, literally 30 pages long. I do think it's important to point out that Nico D'Angelo is one of the first openly queer characters in the Riordanverse, and I would say in YA literature. Obviously, I was always queer, but I truly had my queer awakening through the Percy Jackson series. When reading the Heroes of Olympus, I was obsessed with the relationship between Piper and Annabeth, and I shipped them so hard. It's almost laughable to me how into them I was, and yet I didn't realize that I was queer. Well, I mean, I did, but not at first. I realized when I was engaging in conversations with other fans, and I realized that not everyone shared the same love for those two characters in their relationship that I did. I was like, wait, not everyone has, like, a Pinterest board solely dedicated to Piper Beth? What are you guys talking about? That's when I slowly started to realize that I was bisexual. And despite the fact that Silena, Clarisse, and Annabeth are all not canonically queer, at least not yet, but a lot of fans have found themselves in those characters. You know, I find myself a lot in Annabeth, and I'm like, she is bisexual. She's so bisexual. And those characters helped a lot of people come to terms with their identities. However, Nico, Will, and Piper are all canonically queer. Nico is gay, Will is bisexual, and I don't believe that Piper has officially labeled her sexuality, or her sexuality hasn't officially been labeled in the books yet, but she is in a relationship with a woman in the Trials of Apollo. Her and Jason break up in between Blood of Olympus, which is the last book, and Heroes of Olympus, and the first book, and Trials of Apollo. And then, yeah, she starts dating a woman, and she's queer. And sadly, though, the woman that she's dating in the Trials of Apollo books, or, like, that she's canonically dating, is not Annabeth, sadly. The only person who realized that they were queer through the series. In the article, Why Do the Gays Care So Much About Percy Jackson by Sydney Bollinger, Bollinger explores why queer people are so attached to the Percy Jackson series. As Bollinger writes, the series has been beloved by LGBTQ+ readers since the publication of the first book in 2005, somehow bringing together all of us queer kids before we even knew we were queer. As Uncle Rick, as Riordan is affectionately referred to by fans, wrote more books, they inexplicably gay. Bollinger goes on to discuss how diversity is heavily featured in Riordan's books and how impactful that is to YA readers. And she also jokes about how all fans of Percy Jackson are queer now. There's a joke now that kids who grew up reading Percy Jackson and the sequel series are all gay now, and for good reason. As the original fan base has grown up, we've continued unapologetically loving the series. Even reading the original series as an adult, the same magic as when I was 12 is still there, and I feel the same exact way. Bollinger also mentions how Riordan created such iconic characters that really stick with readers, something that Sass Hank also mentions in the article, Putting Characters First in a Middle School Classroom. Sass Hank talks about her personal experience with literature when she was young and the kind of character sought out. Even though I was afraid to be who I was in middle school, I lived vicariously through characters unapologetically themselves. I feel as if part of why Percy Jackson made so many people queer is because of how relatable the characters are to YA readers and how easily accessible these characters and their stories are, which Riordan himself has discussed in his interview with Alison Flood for The Guardian, entitled Rick Riordan. I feel very protective of my fans. I am aware of my responsibility to make them feel safe. Riordan discusses how important it is to him that he has characters that are actually accurate representations of the kids reading his books. All of the kids that I write about at one time or another have been in my classroom. I feel protective of them. I am very aware of my responsibility to do right by them, to make them feel safe, he says. One of the greatest things about interacting with the fans is when they come up to me and say, "This is the first time that I saw a character like me, and I feel so validated. It helped me through a really tough time." To think that maybe, at least in some cases, I had some role in building a sense of acceptance is amazing. All in all, I think the Riordanverse is a great example of how important representation is in YA literature. And not only does the Riordanverse include queer characters, but it also features characters with ADHD, dyslexia, and features characters of different races and ethnicities and heritage and so much, just so much. That doesn't mean that the Riordanverse is free from criticism, things to critique about the multiple series that Riordan writes and publishes, but I do think that Rick Riordan is doing a lot of good for YA literature by featuring such diverse characters in his work. And without Percy Jackson, who knows if I would be queer? Thank you so much for watching, and I really, really hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned something about why queer representation matters in YA literature, and why Percy Jackson made me queer and made so many other kids queer.
Nobody soldier.